is the deal with Tinkerbell? Is she just a sidekick, a mascot, a spokesperson, a fairy, a princess? Cancelled? She seems like she is simultaneously one of the most prominent and most forgotten characters in the Disney catalog. Hey, brother! Okay, seriously, what is the deal with Tinkerbell? I ask because my 3-year-old daughter recently discovered the lineup of Disney Fairies franchise movies that prominently feature Tinkerbell, and as such, I've been exposed to the character quite a bit lately. But even before that, it is impossible to have avoided one of Disney's most iconic characters of all time, and that's coming from someone who didn't even own a copy of Peter Pan growing up. Who is Wendy? Is she a good guy? The guy with the hook's okay, right? But while Tinkerbell was never center stage, she always seemed integral to the Disney brand, woven neatly into the Disney logo revealed before each cinematic adventure. More on that in just a bit. My point is, though, that it's hard to encroach on the popularity and nearly ubiquitous nature of Mickey Mouse, but sometimes Tink does seem to be right there in the conversation. Her famous pixie dust almost seems like it broke free of its film's restraints and became the source of the magic Disney is so well known for putting on screen. But no matter how iconic she may be, I'm almost simultaneously unsure why she is so iconic and also kind of surprised that she's not more iconic. That sentence was a train wreck and...
Do that in.
That sentence was a train wreck, and yet I stand by it. Tinkerbell is a character packed with backstory, lore, crazy facts, and even more questions. So today we are going to break it all down. What is the deal with Tinkerbell? I am going to kick this thing off exactly where this adventure started for me personally. Nowhere near the beginning, but instead in the late 2000s when Disney was producing a lineup of films that centered around Tinkerbell under the Disney Fairies umbrella. These were home-release films that kicked off in 2008 and may have been in an attempt to create a franchise that could rival the Disney Princess franchise. These are the films that my daughter Addison has loved watching and where I first learned that Tinkerbell's name isn't Tinkerbell, it's just Belle, but not like, you know, Belle. The Tinker is thrown on the front because that is her profession. She's kind of like a magical mechanic who can fix things, a tinker, and thusly you have Tinker space Belle.
Come forward, Tinker Fairies.
And my initial thought was incorrect, because interestingly, that was not a retcon created for the sake of the fairy movies either. It actually dates back to the original carnation of Tinkerbell. Because as is the case with most Disney movies, they are based on existing works, and Peter Pan was no different, being inspired by the 1904 play Peter Pan and its later novelization, Peter and Wendy, both written by a Scottish novelist and playwright J.M. Barrie. Not often they include the villain in the title, but you'd think it'd be more like that movie Hook, straight to the good guy. You're ought to believe in magic. You guys tell me, was that a good Hook impression? I don't know. Back to 1904. In those stories, Tinkerbell is also described as a tinker who mends pots and kettles, and because of her small size, she was only said to be able to contain a single emotion at once, which explained her extreme mood changes. The Disney counterpart is not so singular in her emotions, but does still suffer from rapid mood swings. Another shift from the original 1904 play, though, is the depiction of Tinkerbell. Back then, she was depicted by a small mirror that would reflect a bright light back at the audience. And to add a little layer of mystique to the performances, the little ball of light was credited as being depicted by a Jane or Jenny Wren, a made-up performer. This foil was so effective that His Majesty's Inspector of Taxes sent Jane a tax bill. And it gets a little more interesting still though, because as mentioned, Peter Pan and therefore Tinkerbell are not creations of the Disney company, but instead J.M. Barrie. And Barrie, before his death in 1937, gifted the copyright of these characters to the Great Ormond Street Hospital in London. Which, total aside, but Great Ormond Street Hospital has the acronym GOSH, and I love that more than I can express. But so the question is, how did that little reflection of light from a mirror go on to become an unofficial mascot of one of the biggest companies in the world? Well, it started when Walt Disney wanted to make a feature film depicting the character of Peter Pan, but first had to buy the film rights from Gosh. And Peter Pan is now part of the public domain, however the 1953 depiction of Tinkerbell as a blonde fairy with the green dress is owned by the Disney company. So if you happen to be writing your own story, feel free to use Tinkerbell, just not that likeness. But to discover she's not a wholly original creation by Disney struck me as shocking, because in so many instances, I would have likened Tinkerbell to that of Mickey Mouse, one of the most iconic characters in the Disney stable. Namely because of how integral these characters seem to be to the overarching branding of the whole Walt Disney Company. Like, raise your hand if you remember the classic blue Disney logo screen where Tinkerbell soars across and dots the I in Disney, right? Childhood! Also wrong, put your hands down, because as much as I also remember this, it never happened. It's one of those bizarre cases of the Mandela effect where so many kids remember this happening, and yet it apparently never has. Though, if you see it somewhere, let me know, because I'd love to not feel crazy. And before you comment it, no, it's not in the Bambi one or that creepy fake CGI one. Come on, guys, don't fall for that. But y'all, we have to take a quick pause right there to give a huge thank you to today's sponsor, BetterHelp. You know, it's funny how Tinkerbell is known for expressing one emotion at a time, because as a human adult, I almost wish I could narrow in on one single emotion at a time. Because the fact is, life is complex. For example, my daughter gave me a huge unexpected hug this morning before taking off to play with her friends at preschool, which basically fills my whole cup. But then work, even here at SuperCarlinBrothers, where things are fun, can be stressful. And the point is that sifting through emotions is tricky, but that is where therapy can really help. And I give the example of Addison's hug in particular because in the past, I was so quick to breeze over the things that actually brought me joy, let them just get washed out by everything else life throws at you. But simply practicing gratitude is something that I really had to work on in therapy, because if anything, at times, I have been like Tinkerbell, letting the most recent good or bad thing dictate my feelings. But now I'm a lot better when work is really tough. I know to think back to that special brief moment, and it can actually turn my whole mood around. And the best part is that BetterHelp is convenient. Like, no matter how busy your life is, you can join a session with a licensed therapist with the click of a button. And as the largest online therapy provider in the world, BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a diverse variety of expertise. And our listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/super. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/super. Link is in the description down below. Now back to the video. Anyway, the classic intro has always involved a small beacon of light arcing its way across the castle, thus quietly keeping a far more subtle Tink right there at the front of every major Disney viewing experience. This detail is interesting, especially if you've ever caught a fireworks show at Disney World or Disneyland, because the grand finale features none other than Tinkerbell illuminating herself and flying across the sky backlit by the many explosions happening overhead. And while this part of the act is historic and dates back all the way to 1961, it doesn't quite line up with the advent of the fireworks display each night. The inclusion of Tinkerbell came after many cast members at the park were inundated with questions about where she was. A question prompted by many parkgoers having come to know her as a staple of a television production called The Disneyland Story, hosted by Walt Disney himself. And each episode would open with animated fireworks and, of course, Tinkerbell. So Disney executives and Imagineers came up with the brilliant idea of including Tinkerbell, who would sprinkle fairy dust all over parkgoers to close out their day of magic. And this brings me to one of my all-time favorite Disney facts, which is who first played this real-life Tinkerbell. It is the one and only 4 foot 10 inches, 98 pounds, 71-year-old grandmother and former circus performer, Tiny Klein. I mean, like, what? How cool is that? The answer is supremely cool, and you cannot convince me otherwise. Especially because Tinkerbell lives in Neverland, where you never age, and apparently neither does Tiny Klein. And now you might be wondering to yourself, why hire a 71-year-old to do this particular job? And the answer is because she had some oddly specific training for this exact thing during her years at Ringling Bros. But more specifically, her signature stunt, the aptly named Iron Jaws. Incidentally, I think it was actually the first villain characteristic that they pitched for Wendy and ultimately scrapped. I don't know if we're going to include that. It feels a little embarrassing, but the editors have their say.
Keep it.
The point is, though, much like the Tinkerbell stunt at the end of the fireworks show, she would slide down a zipline from a high wire, except unlike the Tinkerbell stunt, she'd be holding on with her teeth. And to be clear, I'm not making this up. This is real. And what's even more amazing, because while she's not performing as Tinkerbell during that stunt, there are videos of it, and I can't help but feel like the acrobatics that she's performing then are still kind of used today as modern Tinkerbells soar across the sky, if I may. It's kind of like a... in case Disney's wanting new Tinkerbell. But then another really important detail to consider when casting a 71-year-old woman as Tinkerbell is the character's somewhat controversial origins, particularly her design in Disney's 1953 Peter Pan film. Which is to say, Tinkerbell was intentionally designed to be pretty, and for years many believed she was modeled after Marilyn Monroe, a cultural icon of the era. But that's actually a misconception. Mark Davis, the Disney animator responsible for Tinkerbell's design, clarified that the real inspiration came from actress Margaret Carey, who spent days on set interacting with oversized props to help animators bring Tinkerbell's movements and personality to life. Which is incredibly important with Tinkerbell in particular, since she is mostly nonverbal, communicating via pantomime and jingles. If you want to get technical about it, and you know I do, she's in fact speaking a language, but humans just interpret it as jingles. Cool, right? But despite having no dialogue and only being a side character and not even a princess, she was still chosen as one of the original Disney princesses when the brand was launched back in the year 2000. At that point, the lineup consisted of just 10 characters: Snow White, Cinderella, Tinkerbell, Aurora, Ariel, Belle, Jasmine, Pocahontas, Esmeralda, and Mulan. But when they launched the Disney Fairy brand, they yoinked Tinkerbell out of the lineup, so she is actually not an official Disney princess. I guess because they thought she was popular enough to carry her own brand? It's kind of the exact thing going on with Anna and Elsa, who are also not Disney princesses, but just part of the greater Frozen franchise. Esmeralda, on the other hand, not considered popular enough. I don't know if you've seen Hunchback of Notre Dame, but while it's a great movie, it's oddly a hard sell to kids. Something about Count Frollo wanting to burn her at the stake because he couldn't control his own burning desires. Hey, they may have had a point. Not Esmeralda's fault though. Unlike Anna and Elsa though, who have two hugely popular movies based around them, Tinkerbell has never had a theatrical release focused on her at all. Her fairy movies, while popular, were all direct-to-video and remain a somewhat niche corner of the Disney library and also my living room. So the question is, why? Why have one of Disney's most long-standing and iconic characters in their entire repertoire go unused in this fashion? Well, here's my thought. Mickey Mouse. Mickey is obviously the most iconic character in all of Disney. He lives at the very heart of the brand, and unlike Tinkerbell and so many other Disney characters, he is an original creation of not just the Disney company, but of course, Walt himself. But Mickey, just like Tinkerbell, is also not known for being the star of feature-length films. And I think the reason has to do with their value. Mickey and Tinkerbell both are worth more to the Disney company as mascots than as leading characters. They are both carefully managed icons, almost logos of the company. So to even take a swipe at giving them 90+ minutes to be received in any way other than how we already know them runs the risk of doing much more harm than a failed box office performance. If you don't love the character and the flaws that she needs to fill out her debut film, probably The Fast and the Tinkeress, then maybe you suddenly start associating all of those flaws with the logo played before every Disney movie. So ultimately, the long and the short of it is, new storylines could complicate their symbolic clarity, not add to their iconic legacy. But even after all of that being said, here's my personal note to Disney. Go for it! Go for it! Here's another random fun fact that didn't fit anywhere else in the video. The fairies in the video game Zelda are based off of Tinkerbell, and Link himself is based off of Peter Pan. And in a fun twist, Tinkerbell then acts like the fairies of Zelda in the Kingdom Hearts video games. How about that? Art imitates life. Life imitates art and magic and pixie dust. I may have lost the thread. Too Tink, too Tinkerous. Too Tink, too Furious. Tinkerbell 3. Tokyo Drift. Change nothing. Movie number 4. Just Tinkerbell. Tink 5. It's not what you tink.
Then there's a spinoff, Hobbs and Tink.
That is when she finally confronts Wendy, the evil overlord, who, spoilers, is her mother.
What?
What? Guys, as always, thank you so much for watching. Be sure to let me know what you think about Tinkerbell in the description down below. How does she relate to you as a character? It's somebody I feel like I haven't had a strong relationship with, but I feel like the speed at which I have like embraced the character since Addison has started like watching the movies has been so rampant that I have literally no idea where anybody stands. Let me know in the title section down below. Otherwise, as always, thank you so much for watching. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you'd like to see one of the very first Disney videos that we ever made on this channel, breaking down the 5 most snubbed Disney princesses of all time, you can check out this video right over here. But otherwise, until next time, bye! Don't forget to eat cheese.